Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of TEDXcellence, the live series in which I take a look at, I don't know, weird people talking about weird things on a platform that allows for anybody to talk about anything they want, for the most part. It's sort of like a glorified YouTube after a fashion, and I'm just one more person standing on a red dot on a stage. Abstractly, anyway. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good Saturday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. So today is a little bit different. This isn't actually a TEDx talk, but as you can see from the little pause screen there, this is a TED Ed talk. There's specific little slice centered on education. Now, some of you veteran viewers may know that I've done, from time to time, a series called Curriculum of Fear, where I take a look at different things going on in the world of education that concern me. I have a playlist for that, if you're curious, over on my playlists tab. But I've been looking for something in that vein for a while now, but nothing's really jumped out. But then I came across this in the pantheon of TED categories. And I thought this might be interesting. Like all other videos, I have not watched this save to check for sound quality, and this one's basically just a one camera, one person interview kind of thing. It's not a presentation like we're usually used to, so like I say, a little bit different. The official title of this one is The Importance of Affirming Student Identity. The Importance of Affirming Student Identity. What does that mean? I don't know, but we'll find out together. And together means me and all of you who have joined me for this live broadcast from my Corona bunker on the moon. I got to remember to say that at least once during the stream. Hello, Raziel, Gunfox61. Hello, Humble Clay. Hello, Corwin D. Hello, Jimbly. Hello, Zuable. I think. Hello. Tall person. Hello. Quinn the Cultist. Hello. The Original Shroom. Hello. Professor Chaos. Hello. Nicholas Daly. Hello. Cracked. Hello. Twisted Skipster. Hello. Belias Fire. Hello. Gunnar Anderson. Hello. Lucifer Never Changes. Hello. And I'll wait a beat or two to see if anybody else says hello. No One Nowhere. Hello. Becca Fairley. Hello. The Political Mom. Hello. And I think for the moment that's going to be it. Okay. Oh, Ms. Slim 1, hello. My favorite German that isn't Badger Man. Something like that. Mick YTC or Mickey TC, hello. And Functional, hello. All right. So per usual, guys, we're going to start out with a couple of seconds of audio. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed. So as I said, TED Ed Educator Talks, with the official title being The Importance of Affirming Student Identity. All right, let's find out why it's important to affirm student identity. If I can hit the play button.
Public education, designed during the industrial age, was developed with a factory model in mind.
Okay, education was developed with a factory model in mind. You guys hear that all right? Professor Chaos says, Scribbles, the Lords of the Night episode last night has to be in the top 4 of all time. It was awesome. Well, I'm glad you liked it. It was interesting guest, interesting show. Off format, but somehow I survived. All good, says Becca Fairley. Quinn the Cultist says, yep. Political Mom says, yep. Okay. And so let us proceed. So, the education system since the Industrial Revolution, Industrial Age, has been designed in that way. I'm paraphrasing, but let's proceed.
Despite significant advances, very little has changed. I've spent the last 20 years as an educator, a teacher, principal, superintendent, and a parent, and I continue to witness how in these models, the same groups of students continue to be overrepresented in education gaps.
The same groups of students are overrepresented. All right, so wait, the system has not changed since the Industrial Revolution. Did I hear that part right? Sorry, I interrupted myself. I'm going to back up just a bit. Sorry for the repetition, guys. I just want to make sure I understand what he's saying.
Public education, designed during the industrial age, was developed with a factory model in mind.
Okay, education was designed with a factory model in mind. A factory model in mind. Well, if you're talking about a progression where you have to achieve certain prerequisites to advance to the next stage, I guess you could call that a factory model. That might also be just how progression in society works, sort of, or any organization, kind of. I don't know, but all right.
Despite significant advances, very little has changed.
Despite significant advances, very little has changed. Well, you'd have to describe to me, and I understand this is a, consolidated talk, but just to say factory model and little has changed. Well, what do you mean by factory model? What time frame are you talking about? And how do you know how little has changed? Yeah, I'm lacking information, but all right.
I've spent the last 20 years as an educator, a teacher, principal, superintendent, and a parent. And I continue to witness how in these models, the same groups of students continue to be overrepresented in education gaps.
Same groups of students are overrepresented in these models, these factory models. Okay, what groups? And every time I hear group, the other part of my brain wants to say, do you mean group or do you mean demographic? Because those are two very different things.
These students are Indigenous, Black, in particular Black boys, racialized students, that's those who can be categorized by their race other than white, those with special identified learning needs and with disabilities, those coming out of poverty, and 2S LGBT identifying students.
2S LGBT? What? I honestly, I didn't understand that last one. I apologize for rewinding here on this one. I just want to make sure I understand where we're going with this because I'm a little bit lost.
With disabilities, those coming out of poverty, and 2S LGBT identifying students.
2S LBG. Okay, he's using terminology I'm not familiar with. So factory models of education are overrepresented by, they're not groups, they're demographics. So you list off non-white children, students, people with disabilities. They're overrepresented? What is that? What do you mean they're over? So they're, I don't understand. Okay.
The role and impact of identity on educational outcomes is something that we need to become more explicit about addressing in education systems. By identities, I mean all the various ways that we can be identified. For me and for all of us, some of those things include our race, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender, immigration status, religion, and ability.
Those are not identifiers. Those are not identities. Those are aspects of your makeup. They don't identify you. I've used this example a lot of times for dramatic effect, but I'll continue to use it. Long-haired, white male carpenter with a beard. Long-haired, white male carpenter with a beard. Am I speaking of Jesus Christ? Or am I speaking of serial killer Israel Keys? Those elements of someone do not comprise an identity. They don't. They say nothing about who that person is. It says simply something abstract about what that person is or what kind of lifestyle they may lead. You can be disabled and be a horrible, horrible person. You can be disabled and be a saint. These things do not identify you. But our speaker, the educator, principal, teacher, parent, etc., He believes otherwise. So let's proceed.
Our identities shape how we experience the world, and some of our identities give us privilege.
Some of our identities give us privilege, and other identities don't. So you can be both privileged and non-privileged at the same time then, I guess. Okay.
Personally, I never have to think when I go somewhere whether or not there's an elevator or if I have to run up a few flights of stairs. My able-bodied privilege means that I never have to think about these things.
But you do think about these things. You just told us you think about these things. So the fact that you do think about these things means that you don't have that privilege by your own choice. Right? Or am I missing something?
But as a brown person, a Muslim, I'm more cautious about how I engage the police, especially at airports and border crossings, because I can always be sure that I'm going to be randomly selected.
You can always be sure that you're going to be randomly selected. Okay, so every time you go to the airport, you're given special attention every single time, no matter what. You have that privilege, or is that not a privilege? Yeah. Okay.
These are things that I have to think about every single day, but not everyone has to. In my own home, my sons who are racialized Black.
Your sons who are racialized Black. Racialized Black. Okay.
At times, have different experiences with the police than even I do.
Racialized Black at times. Okay.
One day, in addressing this with one of my sons who was stopped a couple of times on his way home from school and telling him how to respond, he said to me, "Dad, it's not fair." I said to him, "Son, this isn't about what's fair. This is about keeping you alive."
Yes, because police officers want to kill people. Police officers are looking to murder kids because of their skin color. That must be the truth. That's why your sons are somehow still alive after their interactions with police, I guess.
Our identities shape how we experience the world and how people see and respond to us.
No, how people see and respond to you is up to them. It's not determined by your appearance inherently. And your appearance is not an identity. How about you, I don't know, go by someone's name as an identity? It's just a thought.
As a principal, one day I put out a great aspiration statement in one of our newsletters. I said, in this school, we want everyone to want to run to school every day.
In this school, we want everyone to want to run to school every day. Okay. I will not begrudge someone trying to get kids excited about education. All right.
Until someone asked me, what if someone can't run?
Oh, Jesus. Well, then I would turn to that person and say, well, you know, there's taking things literally and then taking things as they're meant to be said. That's what I would say. I would say you're being overly sensitive. I would say this is a sentiment we're trying to get across, not a reality that we're trying to impose upon every single person. And that little exchange you just described right there, whether or not it actually happened in real life, that is the kind of nitpicky, stumbling block, political correctness that takes just simply the fun or meaning out of everything, you know?
Today, as the superintendent of equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression,
You're the what? Sorry, I'm backing up again.
The superintendent of equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression.
The superintendent of equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. Is that? I assume that has to be a position in whatever educational institution he's a part of? The superintendent, who sounds very important. All right, well, tell me what you do as the superintendent of equity. How do you make sure that everybody forever and forever is treated, referred to, looked upon exactly the same as everybody else, even though we're all different people with different quote unquote identities?
I work in one of the largest boards on the part of Turtle Island we call Canada.
The part of Turtle Island we call Canada. Got it.
We serve approximately 250,000 students. When we as senior leaders got together and looked at our data, it underscored these realities. For example, our student population, 12% of them are Black.
12% are Black. Okay.
But by the time they graduate, 42% of Black students would have been suspended at least once.
Thank you, Professor Chaos. This is why public schools suck. Wasted salaries on these idiots. Not all public schools are bad. I had a decent public school education, although I would say it did vary in quality from teacher to teacher, depending on where I was at. But, you know, public school is public school. It's a kind of education. But as for this, so 42%, so 12% of the population are Black, 42% of those students are suspended at least once. Okay. What are the statistics for all the other demographics? I mean, I'm curious to know.
Education is a colonial project.
Okay. Now, he just did there what I've pointed out again and again and again. Someone will bring up some kind of statistical disparity or some kind of statistical fact, let's say, that deals with gender or race or orientation. He'll say it and then just let it sit. Won't go any further, not give any further curiosity as the whys, the wherefores, or anything else. Just let it sit with the implication that it is caused by, in this case, racism. Obviously, because this number is this wise, it's racism. That's not how you deal with data. That's how you just promote a theory without actually promoting it. You reach a implied conclusion without providing any evidence. And you're an educator. Got it.
The systems and structures, the laws and the cultures were created based on the beliefs and attitudes of those who were in power at that time.
So you mean white people, or are you even going to get that explicit, even though you've been mightily explicit with everything else?
Some of those beliefs included pieces like indigenous people are uncivilized and they need to be dispossessed of the land, that Black people existed for the economic benefit of those in power, that women were less than men and so they shouldn't be allowed to vote or hold public office.
And all of those beliefs are still in practice today in custom and law in Canada. Or am I misunderstanding you?
That 2S LGBT identifying people needed to be medically fixed or locked away.
2SLBG. Does he mean two-spirit? Is that what the 2S is? Two-spirit? Which is, I'm not saying that I'm an expert on this, but two-spirit is sort of this notion of a indigenous brand of non-binary. The last I knew, that's kind of what it meant. Again, I'm not meaning to be quoted on that, but that's just my sort of rough understanding. Maybe is that what 2S means?
And that people with disabilities should be locked away.
Yeah, okay. And all of those thoughts, all of those theories, all of those customs and laws that may have existed at one time, they're all still in place, they're all still in practice, and they're all still enforced. Nothing has changed in Canadian society since any of those notions and or laws were in place. Nothing's changed. Everything's exactly as it was back then. And the school systems reflect those same notions today. Is that what I am to understand?
All of these were coded into the systems and structures around education.
And again, they are all still active. That is what you are telling us, right? Those are the rules that you have had to enforce despite your best efforts in the course of your career, correct?
Systems and structure reflected those beliefs and attitudes, and so they're not neutral. We have to accept that they work for some and not for other children.
I'm waiting for you to affirm that these customs, cultures, and laws are still in effect and practiced today. Please tell me that's so. I'm waiting for some actual declarative truth here and not just some kind of amorphous platitude going off into the ether without any evidence. Because if Canada's that bad, boy, I would love to know.
Since identity is the common factor in who's successful and unsuccessful, systems need to engage in learning and unlearning about identity.
No, identity does not determine success. I hate to tell you this. Now, let me back up and say, it's not that nepotism does not exist. There is nepotism. But that's not necessarily identity. That's relation. Success, for the most part, is gained by merit and effort. It's not guaranteed, but it is gained more often than not by merit and effort. Your identity, or in this case, your skin color, your gender, your orientation, your ability or disability, does not inherently determine success. But if you believe that to be the case, if you believe that merit plays no part and that someone's place in life is predetermined by elements of their makeup that say nothing about who they are, but simply what they are, that is your problem.
In order to be able to change those outcomes, Einstein tells us that the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same things, hoping for different results.
And Einstein was a master psychologist. Was that actually Einstein's quote? I honestly don't know. I mean, I oftentimes hear someone attributed with a particular famous quote that it wasn't actually their quote. Maybe it was Einstein's. I don't know. Okay, so I guess that means that you, given your identities, should not have succeeded at all in anything ever. And yet you've been a principal and a teacher, and now you're a superintendent of equity. Well, how is that possible? How did you overcome your inherent flaws?
As adults, none of us check our identities at the door, whether we're male, female, trans, black or white, Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. These things are important parts of who we are.
No, not necessarily. Maybe as individuals, but I'll tell you what, you go from one Christian to another Christian, and one person's definition of Christianity, I bet you dollars to donuts, is going to vary wildly in different places with another person's definition of Christianity. That's why there are different sects of Christianity. I mean, it might be part of your life. You may value it as part of who you are and how you live your life, but it does not inherently make you part of a monolith until you go on some kind of grand crusade or something, I guess.
We need to move away from saying things like school is only about learning or things like I don't see color.
Why? Why? Why isn't school just about learning? Why is the concept of colorblindness something that should not be said? Why should I not assess people on who they are and not the color of their skin? Why?
Because students experience their identities in school every single day.
What does that even mean? What does that mean? Students are just people. They are young people. They're no different effectively than me or anyone else. I mean, by that, and I use the word loosely, logic, all of us experience our identities every single day. And what does that mean? I mean, I went to school all my growing up, and my identity was me. I wasn't branded or on the basis of my skin color or something else. I didn't brand others on the basis of their skin color or something else. There were nice kids and mean kids and kids I didn't know. Honestly, that was about it. You know, in a school as large, like in my high school, as large as it was, with as many kids as there were, I knew by name a handful of people. I knew personally an even smaller number than that. And then those that I actually spent any time with was even a smaller number than that. Now, kids can be mean. Cliques can be formed, certainly. But what does that mean? They experience their identities they wake up and they are who they are. You're right. They experience their identities every single day. What does any of that have to do with school is about learning or the concept of colorblindness?
Identities are complex and they intersect.
Do they? Okay, if you say so. And remember, identities are your skin color, your gender, your religion, your ability, your orientation, your background, I don't know, the music you listen to, the clothes you wear, how much money you've got. I don't know, everything. They all intersect. Oh, yeah. They intersect in each individual, maybe?
So a child who's gay will face barriers in our schools.
A child who's gay will face barriers in our schools. What kind of barriers? Like what?
But if that child happens to be a Black Muslim lesbian child with a disability coming out of poverty, she will face compounding barriers.
Intersectional theory. Everything is terrible forever. Every one of those single elements he listed off in this hypothetical student, in his mind, all of those things are inherently negatives. They are inherently disadvantages. Disadvantages in life. Okay. Now, depending on what you're talking about as far as disability, well, that could be a disadvantage depending on what we're talking about. But everything else, being a lesbian, Black, Muslim, out of poverty, all of those things inherently make that person, underprivileged, disadvantaged, flawed in some way. They're already at a detriment or something in society because of those things. That's the message you're sending to students? That those aspects of their makeup are inherently detractors from their possibilities in life? That's the message you want to send as an educator, as a parent, as a principal? Okay.
As a teacher and a principal, what that meant was I needed to get to know my students well beyond their likes and dislikes.
You mean as individual people or as demographic aspects? Because you've only talked about abstract aspects that are not determinative of someone's identity. I'm curious to know.
In my classroom, I made sure there were snacks available. It was a positive space for LGBT identifying students, and there was a space to pray.
I don't know what grades you taught as teacher, or as a teacher, I should say. Why would you, or how would you encourage their sexuality in the classroom? Setting aside the fact that the T in LGBT doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation. So we'll set that one aside. But otherwise, what does your classroom have to do with promoting or encouraging sexual orientation of one stripe or another? And to pray, you say. So were you promoting religion in your classroom? I mean, I don't know what kind of school you teach at. Maybe it's a religious class or a religious school, but if it's a public school, I don't know what the laws in Canada are exactly, but I would be curious to know if encouraging prayer in your classroom is, for lack of a better word, kosher.
As a beginning teacher, I chose to work in challenging neighborhoods to be able to make a difference in the lives of children.
So you went into places you didn't live and by implication accused them all of mistreating children. Okay.
In order to prepare them for life in the real world, I used to give lots of homework until I read the research that says it has very little value for learning outcomes. And in fact, it reinforces the disparity between students, especially those coming from poverty.
Homework damages low-income children? So you didn't give out homework as a teacher because homework victimizes those without money? Okay. Humble Clay says, praying is fine in the classroom. It just can't be organized by the school or the teacher. Okay, well, he didn't say, maybe I missed it. He didn't say he was organizing the prayer. He was just making it comfortable to do so if you felt like it. And that's okay. That's legit then, I guess. I wasn't sure. But anyway, yeah, no homework because it victimizes poverty kids. Not quite sure how that works.
I chose to work in those schools to be able to try and make a difference. But upon self-reflection, I realized that I was the one creating the barrier.
Oh, really? Oh, well, okay. I'm very curious to know what the content of this self-revelation was.
This learning over time meant for me that I had to try and do things differently. Looking at a human rights approach, inclusive design is an approach that often thinks about people with disabilities. Working with a group of educators, we looked at how inclusive design and approach could be constructed that would be used throughout education that affirmed all identities in classroom spaces.
But how about affirming the identities of your students by talking to your students, treating them like people and not like percentages, treating them as individuals and not as skin colors? How's that for affirming their identity? They come to school to learn. You are there to teach. You're not there to counsel people on the ravages of their inherent flaws. Thank you, first name, last name. In high school, there was a classroom that you could go before school started that you can pray in. Yeah, no, we had, in my high school, they had before and after like prayer circle meetings and things that people could voluntarily go to, like just outside a campus, or if it was raining or something, like in one of the classrooms or something. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I wasn't sure if he was saying he was instigating prayer in his classroom, and I wasn't quite sure if that was legitimate or not. But I'm going to set that aside because it didn't sound like that's what he was saying, but I wasn't sure. But yeah, affirming the identity of your students, talking to them like human beings, working with them one-on-one as much as possible to get them through the assignments that you're supposedly giving them, even though apparently homework is a classist structure or something.
And it begins by thinking about those identities and thinking about who is most marginalized amongst them.
How about just treating them as individuals and equals in the classroom and not looking upon them and assessing them on the basis of what they look like or the basis of whatever elements they might possess physically or elsewise, that they are inherently marginalized, that they're inherently oppressed? Because if you look upon someone and you decide without ever talking to them, without ever getting to know them, that they're inherently flawed, that they're inherently disadvantaged because of the color of their skin or what their gender is or something, I hate to tell you this, but that would make you the sexist. That would make you the racist, and so on. I hate to tell you that. I don't know if it's something that you've considered.
As a teacher or principal, it meant getting to know their families, their family structures, their histories, their languages, and to make sure it was reflected in the ethos of school and class.
Why? And I understand every community is different. Every situation might be a little bit different. But why do you need to get to know your students that well? Why do you feel it is incumbent upon you to be that invasive into their lives? I mean, if you have a student who's struggling and you're trying to help that student, and and something beyond simple parent-teacher day conversations, if there's something else going on there, maybe, depending on the circumstances, it would be appropriate for you to delve further into their home life or their personal situation, etc. It's a judgment call. I get it. And every situation and every person's different. But to make it a blanket rule that you need to really get into the deep aspects of some kid's life as default, is that really the teacher's place, barring some other, circumstance or situation that might make it necessary to? You're a teacher. You're not their parent. You're not their life coach. But more often than not, I hear about teachers that seem to look upon themselves as something more than simply a teacher, that they are somehow inherently responsible for the molding of their students' minds or outlooks or politics, almost to the point where they think they maybe have to replace the parents. I don't know. It just seems a little odd to me.
As a superintendent, I challenge my principals to think about what groups of students are going into which high school pathways and why, which groups of students are being suspended or not, and how might we be complicit in those outcomes.
So you're challenging your principals to believe themselves to be racist. I mean, you talked about suspensions earlier based purely on race. So I can only assume that what you're saying is you're implicitly accusing your principals, who operate underneath you as the superintendent of equity, whatever that is, that any outcomes, any students who happen to end up suspended or go one direction or another, and if they are of a particular race, they're obviously being victimized by that principal or by the system over which that principal is seeing. Right? I mean, that's the only conclusion I can come to. I don't know how else to look at what you've just said compared to what you've said previous. And also, they're not groups of students. They're demographics. Okay?
Transformation can only begin when we turn our gaze towards us.
Transformation can only begin when we first suspect that we are inherently evil. Right? That's the only way you find the true sin within yourself, is when you're introspective and open yourself up to the reality that you are inherently flawed. And if you make a decision that goes against my personal perspective, as superintendent, I'm going to look down on you as someone who's obviously promoting a racist, sexist system that I've decided is racist and sexist. because I'm racist and sexist, even though I don't want to have that particular introspection. That would be bad.
Once we know who is most marginalized and underserved, I work with principals to begin school improvement planning with those students first in mind.
How? And maybe he'll answer this in the next 10 seconds or something, but I'm curious to know. Let's say that he identifies demographic X as marginalized and underserved. Okay, well, how do you then get your principal to craft individual teacher curriculums or school policies to inherently benefit students on the basis of X demographic? How do you end up crafting policy that discriminates students on the basis of individual demographics? I'd be fascinated to find this out.
What types of structures will serve to engage and inspire them? Which structures need to be dismantled? How are we aligning our budget and our resources to make sure that this is a priority?
Right. So instead of looking at each student as an individual, you're going to look at overall statistical outcomes and make assumptions about what needs to be done about certain students, because you know that if they possess this particular demographic aspect, there is a solution for that particular demographic aspect, because all the students are the same since they all share that same demographic. Is that what I am to understand?
Finally, and most importantly, we have to think about the adult learning necessary, about the identities that we hold in relation to the identities of the students that we serve.
Are we going to be talking about unconscious bias now, or implying such?
How does that shape how we think about instruction, curriculum, achievement, well-being, and success? These are difficult conversations to have, but they are the most important.
Yeah, difficult conversations. Uncomfortable conversations, one might say. The most useful tool in trying to affect change, as we've learned over and over again, is to make people uncomfortable by implying that they're inherently doing something harmful to people because the statistics say so, or the superintendent says so. Yes, discomfort. It's the great equalizer.
The reason that they're so hard is they hit us at the core of who we are.
And who we are is obviously racist and or sexist and or ableist. Right? I mean, that's the only reason it's uncomfortable. That's the only reason there's any discomfort, is because, well, obviously they're racist and or sexist and or ableist. And so when I bring up the fact that certain races and or genders and or people with abilities or disabilities or orientations aren't having the outcomes I decide are necessary because of those demographics, therefore that principle is one of those ists. That's why they're uncomfortable. It's not the accusation. It's the truth that they're just not willing to admit to themselves. Got it.
Remember, I saw myself as a nice person, but my niceness and my good intentions wasn't enough.
I saw myself as a nice person, but that wasn't enough. I had to put my foot down.
It was my impact that mattered. In spite of having experienced poverty and moments of homelessness myself, when I taught in the classroom, I reverted back to the way I was taught, both in school and when I was at the Faculty of Education.
And that was a bad thing? I mean, what was the point of being educated to be an educator if you weren't going to use what you were taught? So is the whole system of educating educators defunct then because you have a deeper wisdom?
Sometimes we feel defensive or embarrassed, and we don't want to have these conversations.
No. It's not necessarily embarrassed. It can be defensive, especially if you're being accused of something that is untrue about yourself. I wonder if they ever entertain that possibility. I'm talking about the people who elevate the notion of uncomfortable conversations. Do they ever entertain the possibility that the discomfort comes from being accused of something that is not true? That the discomfort comes from being held to account for something you haven't done? Do they ever entertain the possibility that what they're doing is bearing false witness? I honestly do wonder that from time to time. Well, okay, all the time.
But it's important that we do not hold marginalized students hostage to our emotions and fragility as adults.
If I talk to you about problems I see in your school as a principal because of demographic outcomes, you can't let your emotions and your fragility stand in the way of change. Because obviously you're fragile and obviously you're being emotional when you're discomforted. It's not that I'm accusing you of something that's not true. It's that you're fragile and you're emotional. For I, as the accuser, I, as the witch finder general, am doing the pure work. I am above reproach. I am above question. Anyone I accuse is obviously flawed.
As a teacher, principal, or superintendent, I try to keep this in mind whenever I'm making decisions. Otherwise, I'm going to use my own experiences and identities to be able to understand and try to solve problems. And that will make me miss critical pieces that affects whole groups of students.
Do you ever entertain the possibility that you might be wrong? Now, I'm not talking about like individual decisions, but your actual underlying philosophy might be inherently flawed. Do you ever entertain that possibility? I wonder. I'm asking a rhetorical question, but I am curious.
I try to remember that as a cisgendered person who's making decisions on behalf of trans children, or as a male making decisions on behalf of girls. This learning is not about creating feelings of blame, shame, or guilt.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You just told us that it is. You just told us that you're going to find the secret discrimination in the numbers that you will then hold the principals to account for and thus have to make penance for by reorganizing how they run their schools, reorganizing or tearing down the systems that are somehow ending up in places that you don't approve of. You just told us that that is what you do. That is what fuels this entire project you're talking about. It's about blame and shame. It's about finding the inherent ideological sins being committed by those under your control and purging those sins per your own assessment. You just spent the last 8 minutes telling us that. You don't get to just say that's not what you're doing and make it so, because that's what you're doing. Now, there's two possibilities here. Either you truly believe that that is not what you're doing, or you're telling us that's not what you're doing because you know that's what you're doing. Either way, it's not a good look.
But about helping us to do better for the students that we serve. Exactly why we came to education to begin with.
I thought you came to education to teach children. I thought you came to education with the belief that an education is the great equalizer amongst people. Being educated gives everybody opportunities and tools to better themselves, to find their path in life. But no, you're going to assess people as either more or less worthy of attention and resources and sympathy, etc., on the basis of their skin color, on the basis of their race, on the basis of their gender, on the basis of their ethnicity, on the basis of their ability, and on and on and on. You've already assessed yourself as a cis male having to oversee trans students. How dare I? Or as a male overseeing females. How dare I? Because I'm inherently flawed. I couldn't possibly make decisions on their behalf. I have to keep that in check the whole time. I can't treat these students as people. I have to treat them as sensitive demographics. And make sure all the principals do as well. All right.
Today in my board, we have a long way to go, but we're on the journey. Through our achievement and well-being goals, we're working to explicitly identify which groups of students are overrepresented in the gaps.
Demographics. They're not groups, they're demographics. I know I dwell on this point over and over again, but there is a certain value in using accurate terms, especially in education. Maybe my standards are just too high.
We're working to make sure that they see their lives and experiences and abilities reflected in the curriculum, in the classrooms, in the instruction, the experiences, and the staff.
What? In the staff? Well, wait a second. Okay, not to say that everything you said prior to that wasn't almost as ridiculous, but in the staff? So are you making hiring decisions on the basis of race and or gender and or orientation and or ability and or religion? It's a very throwaway comment there, but that one I always zero in on for some reason.
Through our equity goals, we're focused on the learning that we as adults need to do.
No, you're not focused on the learning. The learning that we adults need to do? Right, because the adults are obviously wrong. They're wrong to focus on education. They're wrong to treat students as individual people. They have to treat them as demographics. And you're not focused on the learning because homework is a classist system. Obviously, homework is terrible. Holding students to standards and expectations, giving them structure, putting goals in front of them. Those are bad. That's classist or racist or sexist or something. And what you call learning sounds more like re-education, as you've described it.
In order to be able to think about our identities in relations to theirs, so that we move away from this is the way it's always been done to why can't we do it differently? I came to public education in order to make a difference in the lives of the children that I serve.
Oh, I have no doubt that you are making a difference. Whether or not that's a positive difference is a bit up in the air.
Knowing their identities, abilities, and lived experiences is the key to unlocking that potential. Understanding how our own identities interact with theirs in these structures gives us the opportunity, the chance for innovation, and the ability to change the trajectory of public education in a way that will work for every single student that we serve.
Every single student. What about a fully able, straight, white male student? What attention are you giving to that student? Any? Are they just by default advantaged and need no assistance because they're straight and or white and or male? Because everybody else who is the opposite or different from those particular aspects is thus in need of help inherently? Why aren't you treating students as individuals? Why are you looking at demographics as monoliths or as inherent predictors of success? Why are you guilting your principals underneath you into conforming to a particular social ideology and then making them feel as though they are inherently or subconsciously racist or sexist or discriminatory against their students, when probably they spent their entire careers becoming teachers and educators to help people, but now you're telling them that their entire career, their entire way of thinking is racist and or sexist and or homophobic and or anti-religious or whatever. Because you know better. You know inherently that because of statistic X, therefore this school is racist or something. Yeah, identity politics, running education, at least in Canada or whatever aspect of Canadian education our speaker is representing. What a scary notion, to walk into a classroom and have some teacher start shaking in their boots over whether or not they're going to treat you correctly because of your appearance. Your names don't matter. Who cares who you are? What you are is what is important. What you are is what's valuable. What you are is also determinative of your potential success in life. So says our educator. Okay, guys. Well, there you go. That is a superintendent of some measure, I guess. Superintendent of equity. That doesn't sound like a superintendent of schools. It sounds like a superintendent of ideology, but whatever. So what do you guys think, audience? Chat. It's your time. Give the next few minutes up to you if you have any comments, questions, or otherwise. Kieverdam says, because all cis straight white Christian male students are rich. Obviously so. Humble Clay says, wait, China is doing the same thing with Muslim minorities. Well, we don't want to bring that up, obviously. That one servant of Satania who wishes Minilad won or something. Your name shortened. So is the damaging Asian students' work much like affirmative action is making it harder for them? Is he damaging? Well, possibly so. I mean, he didn't bring them up, so they obviously don't need any kind of attention or assistance. They're self-sufficient because of their race, I guess. Corwin D. I'm straight, white male, and Christian, born and raised poor in the ghetto of Flint, raising my family here disabled and still not rich. Well, Corwin, obviously that is a choice you're making. You're choosing to be that way. You have all the advantages in the world simply on the basis of your skin color. I mean, you can just cash a check on that, right? That's what I'm being told. You don't need any attention or assistance as an individual based on your individual circumstances. You've got it made already, inherently, I guess. Asian hippie, I would have been sacked if I acted in the manner he does when I was working in education. Listening to him speak, it's one of those situations where I would kill to be a fly on the wall in one of those discussions he has with one of his principals, going over the numbers, watching the look on the principal's face as this guy effectively tells him that these outcomes mean that he's racist, or these outcomes mean that he's not admitting to his inherent biases, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever I listen to, and this goes for just about any subject that I've covered in the past, any speaker who speaks on a professional level or an authoritarian level on whatever subject, I'm always just dying to know how they operate in practice. When the doors are closed, how does the diversity hiring process work? How does the feminist theory get applied in a social group? Etc. It's one thing to hear somebody give their best shot at sugarcoating whatever it is that they're peddling on a stage at TEDx. It's another thing to want to see actually how it's done in practice. It's one of those, it's one of the things that I'd love to know. How do they actually affect these things actively in their schools, in their businesses, in their lives? Let's see. That one servant says, I circumcised my name to compensate for my long, thorough comments. Oh, okay. Do they count the characters in your name as part of your chat message? Is that it? Oh. Justin Anderson, Wheeler, do you find this racist crap? Well, I think you mean where, or Wheeler? Wheeler. The Wheelers, they were those bad guys in Return to Oz. With Fairuza Balk back in the 80s. If you never saw Return to Oz, that movie's a trip, like an acid trip. It really is. Where do I find this stuff? I've been subscribed to the TED channel for quite a while, and so I just checked on it the other day and found this. That's how I found it. Data Wasteland says, yo, Scribbles, yo, Data Wasteland. Somnambulation. Crap, just got the notification. We'll have to watch it when you're done. Hello, Scribe. Hello, chat. Hello, Somnambulation. And let's see. Functional says, yeah, I would love to know what school board he's on, if any, and report him to the Human Rights Tribunal for being discriminatory. I see. This is the thing. I don't know. I can't make any definitive accusations of anything because he was talking in generalities and sort of abstractions and such. I can only sort of take what he's implying as that's how he runs his business, so to speak, but I don't know. When he talks about making sure that the staff reflect the student body or those identities or something, that's not to say that he actually does use discriminatory hiring practices, but I don't know what else he could mean by that statement. So I'm just curious. I don't know. For legal reasons, I'm making no accusations. I'm just trying to understand what he's saying. So there you go. And Humble Clay says it's Toronto's Board of Education. Okay. Let's see. Ken Lee says a gish gush of assumptions projected at the world, keeping him keeping his useless job. I have to wonder, because the entirety of his job seems to be based on the assumption that the systems, quote unquote, and the principles that he's overseeing, etc., are inherently racist. And those are the problems that he has to solve as the superintendent of equity. Because if you're the superintendent of equity, then the presumption is that things are not being done fairly. So if you're the superintendent of fairness, there's a belief that there's unfairness going on, disparity going on, and that it's systematic. That's why you're part of the system. And yeah, I think I have tread that road enough today, guys. All right. Well, I'm going to end it there because we're just a little bit over the hour that I try to keep these things at. So thank you guys for joining me. It was educational after a fashion, in that I'm more curious now to know if these kind of policies and this kind of thinking is endemic in Canada writ large, or if it's simply this one guy talking and whatever pull or power he has in his particular school district or board or whatever. Anyway, I appreciate you guys all coming out. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you all have a good rest of your Saturday. And hope as well to see you tonight on Lords of the Night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, over on Ranting Monkeys channel. I may do another one of these tomorrow. We'll see if I find one worthwhile. Keep an eye out, if you are not already, on Tailed Features channel, because conceivably tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, he and I may do a third episode of him trying to teach me to speak Scottish Gaelic, which has been all sorts of fun so far, depending on how you look at it. But anyway, guys, everyone, stay safe, stay well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.